Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Ages of Globalization, Geography, Technology, and Institutions by Jeffrey D. Sachs. Narrated by Steve Menasche. Publisher's note: this audiobook includes bonus material. Please visit Tantor.com and type The Ages of Globalization into the search box. Follow the link to the book's page. Then, under the Supplemental Content section, please enter the access code HISTORY, and then click the Unlock button to access the bonus material. The code should be entered in all lowercase letters. All figures, tables, and the data appendix referenced in this audiobook can be found in the bonus material. Chapter 1: 7 Ages of Globalization. Humanity has always been globalized, since the dispersals of modern humans from Africa some 70,000 years ago. Yet, globalization has changed its character from age to age. Those changes have often come quickly and violently. In the 21st century, we need to change peacefully and wisely. In the nuclear age, there may be no second chances in the event of global war. By studying the history of globalization, we can arrive at an informed understanding of globalization in the 21st century and how to manage it successfully. In my interpretation, we have passed through 7 distinct ages of globalization, from the deep past to the present day. In each of these 7 ages, global change emerged from the interplay of physical geography, technology, and institutions. Physical geography in this context means the climate, flora and fauna, diseases, topography, soils, energy resources, mineral deposits, and earth processes that affect the conditions of life. Technology refers to both the hardware and software of our production systems. Institutions include politics, laws, and cultural ideas and practices that guide society. Geography, technology, and institutions are subject to remarkable variability and change, and they interact powerfully to shape societies across place and time. Understanding the interplay of geography, technology, and institutions is fundamental to understanding human history. This understanding is also fundamental to navigating the changes underway in the 21st century. By examining the history of globalization, we can make wiser choices for our societies and economies in our own time. Philosophers, historians, theologians, and others have long asked, is there a direction to history? Can we speak of long-term change or only of repeating cycles of history? Is there long-term progress? I will suggest that yes, there is an arrow of history. In each age, human beings have become more aware of the wider world. Technological advances, especially in transport and communications, and demographic changes in the size and structure of human populations have intensified our global-scale interdependencies and awareness. As a result, politics, too, have gone from being very local to being global, never more so than in our time. Let us keep our eye on 5 big questions. First, what have been the main drivers of global-scale change? Second, how do geography, technology, and institutions interact? Third, how do changes in one region diffuse to others? Fourth, how have these changes affected global interdependence? Fifth, what lessons can we glean from each age to help us meet our challenges today? The 7 Ages. Globalization signifies the interlinkages of diverse societies across large geographical areas. These interlinkages are technological, economic, institutional, cultural, and geopolitical. They include interactions of societies across the world through trade, finance, enterprise, migration, culture, empire, and war. To trace the history of globalization, I will describe 7 distinct ages. The Paleolithic Age, our prehistory when humans were still foragers, the Neolithic Age, when farming first began, the Equestrian Age, when the domestication of the horse and the development of proto-writing enabled long-distance trade and communications, the Classical Age, when large empires first emerged, the Ocean Age, when empires first expanded across the oceans and beyond the accustomed ecological zones of the homeland, the Industrial Age, when a few societies, led by Great Britain, ushered in the industrial economy, and the Digital Age, our own time, in which nearly the entire world is instantaneously interconnected by digital data. In the Paleolithic Age, which I date from 70,000 BCE to 10,000 BCE, long-distance interactions were by migration, as small groups migrated from one place to another. As these groups moved, they carried with them their tools, their know-how, and their emerging cultures. As migrating groups of Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans, entered new regions, they had to fend for themselves in new ways, confronting other hominins, members of the genus Homo, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans, new predators and pathogens, new ecological conditions, such as living at high elevations, and, of course, other competing groups of modern humans. That competition contributed to cultural patterns that have continued to the present day. The end of the last ice age and the onset of a warmer climate enabled the next phase of globalization, the Neolithic, New Stone Age, which I date from 10,000 BCE to 3000 BCE. The fundamental breakthrough was agriculture, both crop cultivation and animal husbandry. As foraging gave way to farming, nomadism gave way to sedentary life in villages. The range of human interaction widened from the clan to the village and to politics and trade between villages. Trade in precious items, gemstones, shells, minerals, tools, was pursued at distances of hundreds of kilometers. The domestication of the horse ushered in a third age of globalization, the Equestrian Age, which I date from 3000 BCE to 1000 BCE. This period is typically labeled the Copper and Bronze Ages, though I prefer to emphasize the role of the horse over that of the minerals. With the domesticated horse, rapid, long-distance, overland transport and communications became possible. The horse served several basic roles: animal traction, horsepower, communications, conveying messages, and military, cavalry. In modern jargon, we would say that the domesticated horse was a disruptive technology, somewhat like the invention of the steam engine, locomotive, automobile, and tank combined. In politics, the horse hastened the arrival of the state by enabling the reach across much greater distances of public administration and coercive force. The next age, known to us as the Classical Age, which I date from 1000 BCE to 1500 CE, marked the rise and intense competition of large land-based empires. Starting around 1000 BCE, some states, such as the Neo-Assyrian state in Mesopotamia, and soon after the Achaemenid state of Persia, embarked on vast territorial expansions, which succeeded as a result of advantages in governance, both military and political. Ideas mattered enormously in the rise of the empires. The major empires were spurred by new religious and philosophical outlooks, such as the new philosophies of the Greco-Roman world that profoundly shaped the outlooks of these societies. The Imperial Age ushered in trans-Eurasian trade, such as between the Roman Empire in the west and the Han Empire of China in the east, carried out both overland and by sea routes along the coastlines of the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean. By around 1400 CE, advances in ocean-going navigation and military technologies led to the transition to a new era, the Ocean Age, which I date from 1500 to 1800. During this new age, empires became transoceanic, indeed global for the first time, with temperate zone imperial powers of Europe conquering and colonizing tropical regions in Africa, the Americas, and Asia. Revolutionary changes in global trade ensued, such as the rise of multinational corporations, the vast expansion of transoceanic trade, and the mass movement of millions of people across the oceans, including the forcible enslavement of millions of Africans bound for American mines and plantations. Politics also became global in scale for the first time, leading to the first global wars fought simultaneously across several continents. The Industrial Age, which I date from 1800 to 2000, marked another profound acceleration of global change. Changes that used to take place over the course of centuries or even millennia now occurred over just a few decades. The Industrial Age was marked by remarkable waves of technological advance and a powerful new alliance of science and technology. With the tapping of fossil fuels, made possible by the invention of the steam engine and the internal combustion engine, industrial production soared. Global populations soared too as the result of massive increases in food production. While the Ocean Age gave rise to transoceanic empires, the Industrial Age gave rise to the first global hegemon, Great Britain, and later the United States. These two powers bestrode the entire globe with unprecedented military, technological, and financial power. But as the end of the British Empire demonstrated, even hegemons can quickly lose their place at the apex of the global competition. We have now entered the Digital Age, from 2000 to the present, the result of the astounding capacities of digital technologies. Computers, internet, mobile telephony, and artificial intelligence, to name a few. The global transmission of data is pervasive. Computational power has multiplied billions-fold, and information technologies are disrupting every aspect of the world economy, society, and geopolitics. We are moving from an era of hegemonic power to a multipolar world, in which several regional powers coexist. The ubiquitous flows of information have globalized economics and politics more directly and urgently than in the Industrial Age. We have seen how a hiccup in one part of the world economy, for example, the failure of the Wall Street investment bank Lehman Brothers on September 14, 2008, can within days create a global-scale financial panic and economic crash. Table 1.1 summarizes the 7 ages, with their time intervals, major technological changes, and scale of governance. The acceleration of change. At the dawn of human history, all humans were foragers, engaged in hunting and gathering food for their survival. There was no urban-rural divide, as there were no villages, much less cities. The Neolithic revolution in agriculture gave rise to farm villages and sedentary life, mostly, but not completely, displacing foraging and nomadism. For thousands of years, up to the start of industrialization itself, almost all of humanity lived in rural areas, and most engaged in subsistence agriculture. Each farm family struggled to feed itself, with only a tiny margin of surplus, if any, sold in the marketplace or used to pay taxes. Up until the 20th century in much of the world, and until today in the poorest countries, agricultural production was so meager that the risk of famine and mass hunger was ever present. The French Revolution in 1789 was partly provoked by widespread hunger during attempts by the government to raise taxes to cover public debts. The Irish famine of the 1840s claimed around 1 million deaths. In the second half of the 19th century, repeated famines in British India and other colonized regions killed tens of millions. Industrialization and the accompanying advances in farm mechanization and agronomic know-how vastly expanded the food production per farmer in the industrial economies. Where it was once necessary for almost all households to be engaged in farming in order to grow enough food for the population, it became possible for a smaller and declining share of the workforce to feed the rest. The expanded food output led to sharply lower risks of generalized famines and widespread hunger. The surplus agricultural workers, replaced by farm machines, left for the cities to find employment. Britain, the world's first industrial society, became more than half urban around 1880, at a time when most of the world was still overwhelmingly rural. As industrialization spread, albeit very unevenly around the world, urbanization and living standards began to rise. The remarkable fact is how long it took for humanity to break free of omnipresent and nearly all-encompassing poverty and hunger. Looked in the long sweep of the human experience, most economic and demographic change has occurred in the blink of an eye during the past 200 years or so of our roughly 300,000 years as a species. The first lesson of long-term global change, then, is that it has been super exponential, meaning that it has come at a rising rate, with the largest changes occurring in the very recent past. Let us consider 3 dimensions of long-term change. The first is the total human population. The second is the rate of urbanization, that is, the share of the global population residing in urban areas. The third is the global output per person. The Hyde 3.1 project has heroically worked to construct consistent estimates of population and urbanization globally and by region during the period since 10,000 BCE. It is a remarkable accomplishment and a vital body of evidence. The estimates of output per person come from a similarly remarkable effort, that of Angus Maddison, a late and great economic historian. The estimated total world population over the past 12,000 years is shown in Figure 1.1. Between 10,000 and 3,000 BCE, during the Neolithic age, the estimated population rose from 2 million to 45 million, an annualized growth rate of just 0.04%. Between 3000 and 1000 BCE, the Equestrian Age, the growth rate rose slightly to 0.05%. From 1000 BCE to 1500 CE, the Classical Age, the growth rate rose again to 0.06%. During 1500 to 1800, the Ocean Age, the annualized growth rate rose further to 0.25%, and the global population doubled from an estimated 461 million to 990 million. Then, during 1800 to 2000, the Industrial Age, the growth rate jumped to 0.92%, resulting in a more than 6-fold increase in world population, from 990 million to 6.145 billion. Thus, for most of human history, the rise of population year to year, even century to century, was imperceptible. With the ocean and industrial ages, the global population soared. The estimated urbanization rate is shown in Figure 1.2. The graph looks nearly the same. At the start of the Neolithic period, almost all humans were still foragers. Urbanization was zero. Yet, even 10,000 years later, in 1 CE, while most of humanity lived in small agricultural settlements, the proportion living in cities was still only 1%. 1,000 years later, in 1000 CE, urbanization had reached around 3%. By 1500, the urbanization rate stood at a mere 3.6%. As late as 1900, the global urbanization rate was only 16%. It is only in the 21st century that more than half of humanity lives in urban settings, an estimated 55% as of 2020. Though we marvel at the magnificent urban remains of ancient Rome and delight in the dazzling urban achievements of Renaissance Florence and Venice, the world's cities in total were home to only a very small share of humanity until very recently. Madison's estimates of global output per person from 1 CE to 2008 are shown in Figure 1.3. Again, we see the same pattern as with population and urbanization. No perceptible change in global output per person before 1500, with annual growth at 0.01%. A tiny rise in output between 1500 and 1820, with annual growth at 0.05%, and then, with the onset of industrialization, a decisive turn upward, with annual growth between 1820 and 2000 at 1.3%. During the 180 years from 1820 to 2000, world output per person increased roughly 11 times, leading to an equally dramatic fall in the global rate of extreme poverty, from around 90% in 1820 to roughly 10% as of 2015. These three cases of super-exponential growth are dramatic. They remind us of the dramatic changes in the world since the onset of industrialization. Yet we should not infer that societies were static before 1800. The long period until the start of industrialization was an active and necessary runway for the eventual liftoff of the world economy. The preceding ages of globalization set the essential foundations of science, technology, governance, commercial law, and sheer ambition that ultimately gave rise to the industrial age. Economic scale and the pace of change. There is a basic idea in economics that a larger market leads to higher incomes and more rapid growth. With a larger market, there can be more specialization in job tasks, leading to greater skills and proficiency of the workforce in each line of economic activity: farming, construction, manufacturing, transport, healthcare, and so forth, and falling costs of production. With a larger market, there are also greater incentives to invent new products because they reach more consumers, and more inventors are available to produce breakthroughs. The most fundamental reason for the takeoff of economic growth around 1800 is therefore scale. World population had reached nearly 1 billion people by 1800, and humanity was increasingly interconnected through trade, transport, migration, and politics. Of course, some parts of the world, notably the North Atlantic, were the biggest beneficiaries of this new scale, and some places, notably sub-Saharan Africa and India, succumbed to brutal and debilitating imperial conquest. Yet the scale of global enterprise by 1800 was incomparably larger than, say, in 10,000 BCE, when an estimated 2 million widely dispersed human beings constituted the entirety of humanity. One can therefore see the history of globalization as a series of scale-enlarging transformations. In the Paleolithic age, modern humans enlarged the scale of human settlement through migration across the world. Yet most individuals spent their lives within a band of some 30 to 50 people. In the Neolithic age, the global population rose roughly 22 times, from around 2 million in 10,000 BCE to around 45 million in 3000 BCE, and individuals lived in villages of several hundred persons. In the Equestrian Age, the population rose from around 45 million in 3000 BCE to 115 million in 1000 BCE, with the vast majority in an increasingly interconnected east-west band of Eurasia. Now, for the first time, humanity was organized into recognizable states, no longer merely interspersed villages. In the Classical Age, the human population soared to 188 million by 1 CE, 295 million by 1000, and 390 million by 1400. Human beings increasingly lived in large, multi-ethnic, multi-religious empires covering vast land areas including the Roman, Han, Mauryan, Persian, Byzantine, Umayyad, Mongol, and other empires. These empires not only fought with each other, but also traded with each other over vast distances. With the voyages of Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama and the transition to the Ocean Age, scale increased yet again, this time to a global reach that reconnected the Old World and the New World through ocean navigation. The world population soared again as food varieties were exchanged across the oceans, such as wheat from the Old World to the Americas and maize from the Americas to the Old World, permitting a vast increase in food production and populations. By 1800, the population stood at 990 million. The Industrial Age decisively intensified global interconnections. By rail, ocean steamer, automobile, aviation, telegraph, telephone, satellite, and eventually the Internet, and the global population soared. For the first time in human history, there were truly hegemonic political powers with sway over much of the globe. First, the British Empire, and then, after World War II, the United States. With the transition to the digital age, global power is shifting again, and the intensity of global interactions continues to rise, this time with pervasive, real-time flows of data across the planet. In this sense, the ages of globalization both explain and are explained by the rising scale of global interactions. Each boost in global scale has given rise to new technologies that have expanded populations and production. Each boost of scale, in turn, has changed the nature of governance and geopolitics. We are now reckoning, however, with a phenomenon unique to our time. In 2020, with the population now at 7.7 billion and rising by 75 to 80 million each year, and with output now at around $17,000 per person on average, measured at purchasing power adjusted prices, the sheer scale of human activity is dangerously impinging on fundamental environmental processes: climate, water, air, soils, and biodiversity. We have reached a scale at which human activities, taken as a whole, are dangerously changing the climate, biodiversity, and other Earth systems, such as the water and nitrogen cycles. We take up that theme later in the book. While scale is crucial for productivity and innovation, geography is often decisive in determining scale. The scale of an economy.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?